All right, buckle up, everybody, because today on the deep dive, we're going deep, deep, deep into the life of an icon, Keanu Reeves. Yeah, you know him, you love him, but trust me, after this deep dive, you're going to see him in a whole new light.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what's really fascinating about this deep dive is that we're not just focusing on his career, the blockbuster hits. We're going way beyond that, digging into the biographical stuff, the man beneath the persona.
Exactly. Like, yeah, everyone knows whoa and the sad Keanu memes and all that.
Yeah.
But we're here to unpack the real story, the how, not just the what. Like, how has this guy navigated some seriously heavy stuff in his life and come at the other side? Well, Keanu.
And that's the real question, isn't it? Because you look at him and you see this almost mythical level of kindness and resilience, right? But then you dig into the biographical material and you find the story riddled with loss, some of it incredibly personal and tragic.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, right? You've got these seemingly opposite sides of the same coin, and we're here to try and figure out how they fit together. So to start piecing things together, we got to rewind way back, go back to his early years.
Yeah, the origin story.
And it's not exactly a fairy tale beginning, you know? What we see in the sources is a picture of instability, starting from a very young age. Abandoned by his father at 3, constant moving around, struggling with dyslexia in school, even expulsion. Like, wow.
It makes you think, right? How do those early experiences shape a person? Not just in terms of personality, but their coping mechanisms, their worldview.
Right, because think about it, constantly adapting to new environments, new family dynamics. Maybe that fosters a certain resourcefulness, you
Yeah.
know, a sense of having to figure things out on your own, maybe even a heightened awareness of how unpredictable life can be.
Absolutely. You can see how that could lay the groundwork for resilience later on, that ability to bounce back from setbacks. But on the flip side, that kind of instability early on can also create a sense of rootlessness, a constant search for connection, for belonging.
And I feel like you see echoes of that throughout his life, his dedication to close friends, those chosen families.
Oh, definitely. Those deep bonds seem to be a recurring theme, and it's something a lot of us can probably relate to, even if we haven't experienced the same level of fame as Keanu.
Right, that feeling of wanting to belong, to find your tribe, it's pretty universal. But unfortunately, the challenges Keanu faced go way beyond those early struggles. And when we move into his adulthood, things take well, a much darker turn.
Yeah, and what's so striking is not just the sheer number of losses he experienced, but the timing of them.
Right. It wasn't spread out over a lifetime. It was concentrated in a relatively short period, less than a decade, right?
Yeah, and we're talking about the death of his closest friend, River Phoenix, then the stillbirth of his daughter. And then, to add to the heartbreak, just 18 months later, the death of his partner, Jennifer Syme, in a car accident.
It's it's almost too much to comprehend, honestly. How do you even begin to process that level of grief, one blow after another?
Yeah. It's more than just sadness at that point. It's what we call compounded trauma, this layering of loss that has a truly profound impact on a person's psyche.
And you would think, with that kind of weight on his shoulders, he'd retreat, you know, become reclusive, bitter.
Yeah, you'd expect to see that, wouldn't you? But that's where the puzzle gets even more intriguing.
Because alongside this profound personal grief, he's out there building a public persona that's almost the complete opposite, the kind, generous, breath of fresh air celebrity. In fact, one of our sources describes him as someone who speaks in a positive and uplifting tone, someone who can brighten up your day.
Yeah, so we're left grappling with this question, right? Is it a facade? Is it genuine resilience? Or is it something else entirely?
It's like, how do you reconcile those two sides of the story, the private pain and the public persona?
And that's where things get really nuanced because we have to be careful not to jump to conclusions, to avoid armchair psychology.
Of course, of course. But there's some interesting concepts we can look at, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've heard of this thing called post-traumatic growth.
Oh, yeah, post-traumatic growth. That's a fascinating area of research. And it might offer some insights into Keanu's story.
So what is it exactly? Like, how can trauma lead to growth?
Well, the idea is that while trauma is inherently damaging, it can also, under certain circumstances, act as a catalyst for positive psychological change.
So it's not about erasing the pain, pretending it didn't happen, but rather finding a way to use it as fuel for growth.
That's a great way to put it, and we see hints of this in some of Keanu's actions. Take his philanthropy, for example. His sister's battle with leukemia clearly had a profound impact on him, leading to his significant contributions to cancer research.
Wow, so you're saying maybe that's a direct manifestation of post-traumatic growth, channeling his pain into something positive, something that could potentially help others.
Exactly. It's almost like he's found a way to alchemize his suffering into something beautiful and meaningful.
That's a powerful way to look at it, and I think it sets the stage for the rest of our deep dive, right? Because we're not just looking at Keanu Reeves' life as a series of tragic events, but as a potential roadmap for how one can navigate profound loss and emerge, maybe even stronger, on the other side. But how does he actually do that? What are the mechanisms at play? That's what we'll explore in part two.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So before we jump back into the specifics of Keanu Reeves' journey, I think it's important to acknowledge something. We're talking about some pretty heady stuff here. Profound loss, grief, and it's natural if this is bringing up stuff for you, the listener. If you've experienced similar things, just know you're not alone in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we continue to unpack Keanu's story, hopefully we can find some, not just understanding, but maybe even a sense of shared humanity,
Mm.
like a reminder that we all face challenges. And even in the darkest of times, there's still potential for resilience, for growth.
Exactly. And, where we left off was this really interesting paradox, right? Keanu facing all this personal tragedy, but then cultivating this public image of like radiant positivity. And again, it's not about judging whether that's genuine or a facade, but just recognizing the complexity of the human experience, especially when it comes to trauma.
Right, totally. And the source material kind of hints at a few ways he might be navigating this. Like there's mention of a quiet, Zen-like philosophy that seems to guide his actions. What's that all about?
Well, it's not so much about following a rigid dogma or specific spiritual practices, you
Yeah.
know. It's more of a mindset, a way of approaching life that prioritizes things like presence, gratitude, kindness.
Okay, and those aren't just abstract concepts, right? Like
Yeah.
we actually see those reflected in his actions, how he interacts with fans, colleagues, even strangers.
Exactly. It's not just talk, it's a way of being in the world.
Yeah. And it makes me think of that quote, I think it was Keanu who said it, something like, grief changes shape, but it never ends. He's not denying the presence of sorrow, but he's also not letting it define him, which kind of aligns with what you're saying about active choices.
Yeah, I love that quote. It's so powerful, and it speaks to this idea that resilience isn't about suppressing or denying difficult emotions. It's about learning to coexist with them, to make space for both joy and sorrow, recognizing that life is full of both light and shadow.
And there's this other quote too, really stuck with me. He said, the person you love is gone, but the love isn't. It's heartbreaking, but also so profound. Like he's not trying to erase the loss, but rather focus on the enduring power of love.
It's such a beautiful reframing, and it ties back to that concept of post-traumatic growth we talked about earlier. It's not about pretending the trauma didn't happen or minimizing its impact. It's about finding ways to grow and evolve because of it.
So are there other examples of how Keanu might be actively choosing growth in the face of all this loss?
Oh, absolutely. Think about his creative outlets. He's not just an actor, he's a musician, a writer, a producer. Those are all avenues for expressing emotions, processing experiences, and ultimately finding meaning.
That makes so much sense. And it's a good reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healing or growth, right?
Mm.
For some people, it might be creative expression. For others, it might be connecting with nature, getting involved in activism, finding solace in spirituality. The key is to find what resonates with you, what helps you make meaning out of your experiences and move forward in a way that feels authentic.
And I think that's a really important takeaway from Keanu's story, right? His experiences are obviously unique in their intensity and public nature, but the underlying themes are universal. We all face loss, we all grapple with pain, and we all have this incredible capacity to find ways to grow and heal.
And it's not about comparing struggles or saying one person's pain is greater than another's. It's about recognizing those shared threads of the human experience and maybe drawing some strength from the knowledge that even those who seem to have it all also face darkness and adversity.
Yeah, and what makes Keanu so relatable, I think, despite his fame, is that he's been pretty open about his struggles. He's talked about battling anxiety, feeling like an outsider at times. He's not presenting this picture of like effortless resilience.
Right, and that's so refreshing, especially in a culture that often glorifies toxic positivity and pressures us to always be okay. Kiana's story is a good reminder that it's okay to not be okay, to embrace the full spectrum of human emotions.
It's almost like he's giving us permission to be vulnerable, to acknowledge our struggles without shame.
And that vulnerability, that authenticity, that's what allows us to connect with each other on a deeper level, to build empathy and understanding.
Totally. And that connection, that sense of belonging can be so crucial for healing and growth. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in our experiences. Even those who seem to have it all face challenges and heartbreak.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Keanu's story, his extraordinary kindness. It's something that comes up again and again in the source material, and it goes beyond just the grand gestures, the philanthropy.
Yeah, it's those everyday acts of kindness, those small moments of connection that can have such a ripple effect.
Like the stories about him giving up his seat on the subway to a pregnant woman
Yeah.
or helping a stranded motorist fix their car.
It's not about PR stunts or trying to look good. It seems to be a genuine expression of his character.
And that's what makes it so powerful, right? It speaks to this inherent human capacity for compassion, even in a world that can often feel dark and chaotic.
It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a positive impact no matter our
And it
circumstances.
doesn't have to be some grand heroic act. It can be as simple as offering a kind word to a stranger, helping a neighbor with her groceries, or just listening with empathy to a friend who's struggling.
Those seemingly small acts of kindness can create a ripple effect, spreading positivity and connection in ways we might not even realize.
And it can be incredibly empowering, right?
Yeah.
It reminds us that we have agency, that we can choose to bring more light into the world, even amidst the darkness.
Exactly. And it brings us back to one of the key takeaways from the source material, that even negatives can still birth positives. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about choosing to focus on the good, cultivating gratitude, and acting with kindness whenever possible.
A message that resonates so deeply with Keanu Reeves' story, but it's also a message that's relevant to all of us, regardless of our individual journeys. We all have the power to choose kindness, to make a difference, and to find meaning, even when things are tough.
And as we head into the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore how this message translates in something even more profound: legacy. How will Keanu Reeves' story continue to inspire and impact the world? Stay tuned.
Okay, so we're back. We're tackling the big question, right? What's Keanu Reeves' legacy going to be?
It's a tough one because it goes way beyond just the movies, the philanthropy, all that.
Yeah, we're talking about something bigger, something that touches on like how we see success, what happiness even means, how we deal with grief and all that heavy stuff.
And what's interesting is, unlike a lot of figures whose legacy gets cemented after they're gone, Keanu's is happening right now.
It's unfolding in real time, and a lot of it's playing out online. Think about that whole sad Keanu meme. It started as people kind of poking fun at him, right?
Yeah.
But then it evolved into wholesome Keanu.
Yeah, it went from this ironic thing to a genuine celebration of his kindness, that down-to-earth vibe.
And that shift, I think, says a lot about where we are culturally. There's this craving for authenticity, for role models who aren't afraid to be real, show their flaws.
And Keanu, he kind of embodies that in a way that few other celebrities do.
He's not putting up a front, trying to be cool or whatever. He's just himself, and that's what makes him so relatable.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us permission to be ourselves, too, to embrace all those messy human emotions without judgment.
And in a world that feels increasingly fake, that's super powerful.
Totally, it speaks to that deeper need for connection, for role models who are both aspirational and relatable.
And Keanu somehow manages to be both. Even with all the fame and fortune, he comes across as grounded, approachable.
He's become this symbol of hope, proof that even when life throws those curveballs, you can still find joy, connect with others, make a difference.
And that impact, it goes beyond the people he meets directly. His story ripples outward, it inspires people.
It really does, and it makes you think about what legacy truly means. It's not just about what you achieve, but the values you embody. With Keanu, it's kindness, resilience, authenticity, that generosity of spirit.
And those aren't just words, they're like woven into who he is, how he moves through the world.
It's a legacy that goes deeper than any specific accomplishment. It's about how he lives his life, the choices he makes, how he treats people.
He's challenging us to rethink what success looks like. It's not just the money, the fame, it's about living a life that's meaningful, that aligns with your values.
Yeah, and as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is that Keanu's story is still being written.
It's unfolding, and his impact will only continue to grow, inspiring us to be a little kinder, a little more resilient, a little more ourselves.
And that's a pretty amazing legacy to leave behind, but it also asks something of us, right?
Like, how are we going to use our own experiences, the good and the bad, to shape a legacy that matters?
What kind of impact do we want to have on the world? That's something to think about. And on that note, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time, and until then, keep searching, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep diving deep.